Hi, welcome to America Uncovered. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. The Trump administration has taken aim at a powerful consumer watchdog, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB. It's gone head-to-head with some of the biggest banks to stop fraud and discrimination. But President Trump has called it a total disaster, saying financial institutions have been devastated. Yep, simply devastated. The CFPB was created in 2010 in the wake of the financial crisis. According to their website, they protect consumers from unfair, deceptive, or abusive practices and take action against companies that break the law. They do that by policing credit card companies, banks, auto lenders, and a variety of consumer finance products. Since 2010, the agency has tormented banks and mortgage lenders that defrauded consumers, forcing them to return almost $12 billion to borrowers. But let's be honest, most people have never heard of the CFPB. It's just another stupid government acronym. But what makes the CFPB different from the other banking regulators, like the SEC, the FRB, and the OCC, is that this one has 4 letters instead of 3. Also, the President of the United States wants to destroy it, and then bring it back to life like a zombie bureaucrat. So now that you know how Donald Trump feels about the CFPB, you might have already made up your mind to love it or hate it. But before you click away from this video, let me at least give you enough background that you can tell all those jerks on Facebook why the CFPB is the best/worst agency ever. See, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is not like any other government agency. In fact, it's barely even a government agency because it operates independently. One key reason is that the CFPB gets its funding directly from the Federal Reserve, instead of having to go through Congress, the way pretty much all other government agencies do. What this means is that Congress doesn't have oversight. It's like how after you move out of your parents' house and have your own job, you suddenly don't have to do what they say anymore. Here's how one congressman described the CFPB in 2014.
The place is just, it's a wonderful example of how a bureaucracy will function if it has no accountability to anybody. It turns up being a joke.
So fast forward to this past November. Richard Cordry, the longtime director of the CFPB, stepped down. He appointed his chief of staff, Leandra English, to be his successor, which CFPB bylaws allow him to do. Except, maybe they don't? So President Trump appointed his own guy to be director. Wait, that guy looks familiar. Isn't Mulvaney the same guy that called the CFPB a joke? Well, this whole thing is Greek to me, because Miss English sued. Her attorneys argue English is entitled to the position under the Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform law that says the deputy director becomes acting director when the agency's top spot is vacant. The White House disagrees. They want Mick It's a Joke Mulvaney to run the CFPB. But now he wants you to know he is absolutely not out to destroy it.
Rumors that I'm going to set the place on fire or blow it up or lock the doors are completely false. I'm a member of the executive branch of government. We intend to execute the laws of the United States.
Execute the laws? Poor choice of words. I think a lot of President Trump's critics are pretty confident he's trying to execute the laws. So you might not get why Mulvaney called the CFPB a joke. Well, I'm an expert in comedy, so please allow me to help. Here's the setup. The CFPB has handled 1.2 million consumer complaints. It's tackled predatory payday loans with interest rates that can exceed 400%. It's investigated and fined 14 lenders for overcharging student borrowers, lying to them about loan rates, and misrepresenting themselves as having a relationship with the federal government. Like in September, when Citibank had to return nearly $4 million to students they scammed. Going up against predatory and discriminatory auto loans were also one of the many jokes that were a total disaster. Take Ally Financial Inc. It had to pay $80 million to all the ethnic minorities who were given higher loan interest rates than white people were. But that was still nothing next to the $185 million they slammed Wells Fargo with for creating an estimated 2 million fake accounts and billing customers for it. That was the largest fine ever paid to the CFPB. And yet, Republicans are trying to eliminate the CFPB's supervisory authority. I mean, who needs a consumer watchdog that watches things? I know, you're probably not laughing right now. In fact, you might be thinking President Trump and the Republicans have sold out consumers in favor of bankers and Wall Street. Oh, but now I get to the punchline. When the CFPB was created, its founders felt it had to be protected from political interference. I wonder why they felt that way. They did that by setting the CFPB up differently than other regulators. They gave it government-like powers, but also made it independent from the government. Instead of being run by a board of governors, it's run by a single director. And as I mentioned earlier, it gets money directly from the Federal Reserve with no congressional oversight. All the director has to do is ask for whatever he wants up to a certain amount, and he gets it. That's how, in just a few years, the agency swelled from 58 employees to 1,600, and a budget last year of nearly $650 million. And the director answers to no one. Even the President of the United States would have had a hard time firing him. And remember, Donald Trump is really, really good at firing people. Also, the original CFPB bylaws allowed the director to appoint his own successor with no one else in the country having any say, which is what Richard Cordery tried to do by appointing Leandra English. But in October of 2016, a federal court was like, the way you guys are set up is kind of unconstitutional. The court wrote, when measured in terms of unilateral power, the director of the CFPB is the single most powerful official in the entire U.S. government other than the president. Indeed, within his jurisdiction, the director of the CFPB can be considered even more powerful than the president. Wow, that is kind of scary. That's a terrible joke. That ruling came in the wake of a strange realization, which is that a super powerful, unaccountable group was abusing its power. A mortgage lender, PHH, brought the CFPB to court. PHH was accused of illegally referring consumers to mortgage insurers for kickbacks. They were fined $6 million by a judge. But CFPB Director Richard Cordery decided to raise that fine to $109 million. Is that a problem? Really sticking it to those fat cats? Well, part of the problem was that the fine was arbitrary, and PHH's lawsuit resulted in the structure of the CFPB being ruled unconstitutional. That court also said PHH actually did everything according to law, so why are you fining them over $100 million? So why did Director Cordery think he could get away with it? Well, usually, the targets of the CFPB don't fight back. Because the CFPB is so powerful, they can levy fines without due process. Sometimes this can be really helpful, because rich bankers could otherwise tie up a case in court for years. Sometimes this isn't so good, like when the financial institution targeted didn't commit a crime and yet has no opportunity to defend itself. That's the opposite of innocent until proven guilty. The American banker says, absent such a pre-enforcement process, a person or company may be forced to fight their way through the entire enforcement process, often at substantial financial cost and irreparable reputational damage. Worse, many would be forced to settle a case to avoid those harms, even if the charges were flawed from the start. In other words, a lot of financial institutions were so afraid to go up against the CFPB that they just settled regardless of whether they had done anything wrong, because it would have caused them so much damage. For example, a former CFPB enforcement attorney told this story about a small business owner they went after. The legal expenses would crush the man's business and cost employees their jobs. He'd had no opportunity to present evidence or tell Cordery his side of the story, and enforcement hadn't even conducted an investigation. The CFPB has overstepped its bounds in other ways. You know how I said earlier Republicans are trying to eliminate the CFPB's supervisory authority? Well, that sounds bad, but supervision is different from investigation. To investigate someone for an alleged wrongdoing means you go to a court, get a warrant, subpoena documents, etc., all of which are pretty easy and quick to do. But supervision is like a permanent search warrant that doesn't require a court judge to sign. Supervisory authority is a lot more intrusive, which is why it's usually only limited to industries where if something goes wrong, it can cause catastrophic harm. The CFPB has, in some cases, used its power to help consumers who've been defrauded. But sometimes, it's not done quite right. Take the auto lender example I mentioned earlier, where the CFPB sued Ally Financial Inc. for discriminating against minorities. Well, get this. The CFPB itself didn't know car buyers' race or ethnicity because it is illegal for dealers to collect or keep such records. So, how did they know there was racial discrimination? They looked at people's names on the documents and guessed if they sounded like black or Hispanic names, and then built the whole case around that. Mr. Black. Gotta be a black guy. Shoot. As for the $80 million Ally had to pay for that, well, the CFPB also had to guess who to give that money back to, since they didn't know anyone's race to begin with. And this report to the U.S. House of Representatives found that, yes, that meant white people got paid. Okay, so that all sounds a little politically incorrect. Maybe it was well-intentioned, but paying people settlements based on how black or Hispanic their name sounds is incredibly unfair. But it's not like the CFPB itself is racist. Oh. So it turns out there may have been some serious racism going on within the CFPB. White hires were favored, minorities who were hired often got lower salaries for the same work, and Republicans were almost never hired. And if you rocked the boat, you faced retaliation, as this former employee testified.
Do you believe that white male managers have engaged in discrimination against women and minorities?
Yes, sir.
Why don't they come forward?
Sir, they're afraid because they know that I've been retaliated against. And also, quite frankly, I asked them and they don't want to make themselves subject to a public hearing.
So if the CFPB is supposed to be a watchdog, who watches the watchdog? As for the Wells Fargo story, yes, the CFPB hit them with a huge fine they probably deserved. But despite all the CFPB's power and supervisory authority, they didn't even do anything about Wells Fargo's wrongdoing until it was exposed by the LA Times. Remember, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was created in the wake of a serious financial crisis, and it was given enormous power so it could quickly solve serious problems. In a way, it's like the Avengers. When aliens attack New York, you're really glad Samuel L. Jackson put together a team of super powerful gladiators. But afterwards you look back and you're like, wait, the Avengers stopped the aliens, but they also destroyed like half of Manhattan. I get it, they did what had to be done. It was a crisis. But do we still want the Avengers around? I don't want a 1,200-pound Incredible Hulk patrolling Grand Central Station every day arresting shoplifters. So the CFPB has stopped real fraud by financial institutions, fraud that other regulators may not have gone after. But it also continues to have unchecked power and a huge budget, and for years has been free from government oversight. And that's why Trump wants to put his own guy in charge and bring the CFPB under the oversight of the government, as other federal agencies are. Should the CFPB be under the authority of the government? Or should they be completely independent but still enormously powerful? It may take a civil war to decide. What do you think? Leave your comments below. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.